All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Lasting Learning Podcast. I am super glad you're here. And in a second, you're going to be super glad that you are here as well, because I have a guest that a lot of you probably know because he is everywhere right now. This is a guy who is absolutely killing life and killing the world of education for the better. He is a speaker, a writer, a counselor, an educator, just an all-around amazing, awesome guy. He is a builder of cultures and a builder of people. Today, we got a guy coming to us from the Pacific Northwest, representing the state of Washington. That's right. Today, we've got the one, the only, Hans Appel with us. Hans, thanks so much for being here today.
Man, I'm excited to be here. Can you just go everywhere with me and do that little intro? Because
Done.
that would
You
feel
pay for
amazing.
travel, man, and
That
I
would
am
feel
there.
amazing. That's awesome. Thanks for having me, man. I'm super stoked.
Absolutely. I've been wanting to have this conversation for a while, and I know life is just crazy for all of us right now. And this is a date that we've had to kind of adjust a few times, but I'm so glad we were able to make this happen. So, Hans, there might be one or two people around the world who don't know you for some crazy reason. Do you mind just introducing yourself?
Yeah, so I feel like there's almost two parts to that. So I'll give you the first part where I just kind of explain who I am and my job title. That's for the people that don't really care about the answer. And then I'm going to give you the real answer because that's what this podcast is really about. So I guess I would start off and say I'm a counselor at Enterprise Middle School, and that's in Little West Richland, Washington. It's probably about 3.5 hours east of Seattle. Our community is it's kind of deserty here. We're really known for apples and wine. It's similar to Napa Valley for those listeners that are kind of out in the California area. Love it. I've been a counselor for 19 years and at Enterprise since it opened. So I'm a middle school junkie. Like, middle school was hard for me, and I love working with middle schoolers. So that's what I would tell people on the short end of the answer. The real answer is I'm an educator of joy, Dave. I believe that education at its highest level is about inspiring others to discover and develop their joy. And I think, when we start talking about joy, there's so many avenues to that. But I think when we can create exceptional school culture and climate in our schools, we give students the opportunity to pursue joy. And so, man, I have my foot in so many things right now, and I'm sure we'll talk about a bunch of them, but I'm blogging and podcasting and writing and speaking. And all of it comes kind of back to how can we create these, joyful experiences for students.
That's good, man. That was a great intro. I love how you took both paths and kind of interwove them together. When I introed you, I said that you were a guy who builds culture. And you, in describing where you currently live, actually mentioned a little bit about the culture of your community, or the climate of your community. You said you're about 3.5 hours east of Seattle in the state of Washington, and it's kind of deserty.
Mm-hmm.
Yet there's all this amazing stuff that comes from this deserty area, apples and wine. And it's a region that someone like me, I've never been there. I have no idea what it's like. Can you just describe that part of Washington to us a little bit, and then explain what it is that resonates with you and why you're there?
Yeah, I actually grew up here. I went to high school, just in one town over, basically. And the reason I mention that is because I think a lot of people think of the Pacific Northwest as this, rainy, wet climate. And that's kind of what I think Seattle is, right? The west side of the state. But I think it's important to kind of know, a little bit more about where we're from. And this was a great place to live growing up. I loved it. Went away to college and then came back. My wife and I are both in education. We were lucky to be able to work at the same school, which is unusual, but such a cool thing. But yeah, I'm super amped to be able to kind of serve a community that I grew up in, and kind of come full circle. I actually started my career back at that same school at the middle school level before switching over to Enterprise. So, it's a weird experience. I don't know if you've had this experience, but, I actually have had teachers that I had, you know what I mean? Like, as a student, and Then you come back and now you're colleagues and you're trying to call them their first name. I'm actually thinking of a PE teacher right now she's in her 60s and just crushing it. Like she has more energy than you and I combined. Like she's
Wow.
just incredible. And yeah, she was my middle school PE teacher. So that's just a cool opportunity to be able to come back and kind of serve your own space. You know what I
No,
mean?
that is super cool. I've had people who I worked alongside as a teacher and then started becoming an administrator and
Mm.
trying to maneuver that relationship, and that's awkward. I can only imagine that experience. I asked the question about the climate and culture of Washington. I love how you described it and said most people have this perception of it, and you went on to describe Seattle. I'm glad you went there, and I didn't preview this ahead of time, but because in my head, that's a great metaphor for your experience in middle school. A lot of people have this perception of what middle school is like, and they're like, oh, it's this dreary place. Nobody would ever want to go there. But if you know it and you love it, I mean, it is the most amazing place on the planet. I can't imagine serving as a counselor in a middle school, though. So I am a middle school guy through and through, spent all my time teaching as a middle school guy and was an AP and a principal in middle schools. Love it. But the one job I could never do is middle school counselor. You got to explain this to me. What is it really like?
I love it, man. You know, for me, growing up was tough. And I think that's kind of why I got back into the middle school world. I think, I grew up in sort of an abusive home. So school really became my safe haven. So I look back and have like such fond memories of coaches and teachers and people that kind of like got me to where I am today and helped me find success. And so, when I was, kind of going through my grad program and figuring out, okay, where do I want to work? What level do I want to be at? It was just a natural pull back to middle school because middle school was such a challenging time. And it was a challenging time for me outside of school, which is kind of what you're alluding to. There's so much going on for students, right? Today we have anxiety and hormones and, you know, just all the pressures of trying to live up to the social media world. And there's just so many things that I feel like I didn't even have to deal with back then. And yet it was still hard for me because of stuff going on outside of school. And so I love, back to your question, I love working with kids every day because they're like little adults and they're like little kids at the same time. They have both ends of that spectrum. 6th to 8th grade, it's only 3 years, but it feels like 10 years apart. Like when they're ready to go off to high school, they're like little young adults. When we get them in 6th grade, they're like children, right? And so the approach that you take working one-on-one with, or even in a small group setting with a 6th grader to an 8th grader is such a wide spectrum that I love it. My job is different every day. I'm lucky to be able to work with special educators that really support me and kind of put me in a position to do my best work. But the kids are what makes everything. And that you spent time in middle school. They're just fun. They say crazy things. They do crazy things. I love it, man.
I think one of the reasons I loved it so much is because I feel like I am the consummate middle schooler still today. So I'm 42 years old, and sometimes I still often I still say stupid things without that filter and without thinking it through. I still get caught up in that comparison game and
Sure.
looking at everybody else and saying, well, they're more mature than me, or they're developing faster, they have more than I do, and trying to play catch up. I'm always worried about what other people are thinking about me. Like I feel like I'm still that middle school person. Um, 30 years later.
I
Do you
relate to
ever
that
go
so
that?
much.
You do?
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
I relate to that so much. Yeah. We call it middle school mentality here. And it's just like, I think it's something with your brain. Like you still laugh at the stupid stuff that middle schoolers laugh at. Totally feel that vibe, man.
So I'm curious, like, how does that play out in your own world, other than like throwing out the "that's what she said" jokes all the time? Because I still do that. How does it play out in as a grown man, a guy that's out there truly? I said it and I mean it, killing it right now. How do you temper the comparison game or wondering what people are thinking or saying? Does that come into your own reality?
I think it just, benefits me because I think I'm able to see the world not just as an adult. And so I'm able to kind of get inside the skin of what it would feel like to be a 12, 13, 14-year old and how we could make school better for them. Right. And and maybe that's because of kind of what you're alluding to, as far as just having that mentality of laughing at the silly jokes or whatever. But yeah, I think it I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I think it plays out well in life. I think, there's probably challenges where, you look at yourself and go, okay, can I be doing more? Should I be doing more? Am I, you know, accomplishing as much as I want to? Um, and so I think sometimes that comparison game comes out, but I think social media has probably brought that to everybody. Even people that don't laugh at the silly jokes that you and I laugh at, they probably still are having those same comparison games. You know what I mean?
For sure. I mean, I I guarantee there are other people out there, and especially right now, the world just it's evolving so fast, and it feels like we're more competitive than ever, but yet we put up this facade like we're all being collaborative.
Mhm.
We want to act like we're trying to lean in on each other, but at times I feel like people are out there doing it to cut the legs out from each other, and it's heartbreaking and it's scary, but it's also reality. I'm wondering about your current building, where you are in Washington State, in this little deserty area. Um, I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, is this a building filled with adults who have backgrounds similar to yours, grew up in the area, maybe they always wanted to be an educator, or do you have a lot of people that have come from the outside?
I think it's a lot of people from, I would say, Eastern Washington. As far as the background, I don't know if I would necessarily say everybody comes from a similar background. I think, when I think of background, it's not just where you come from, right? But like kind of what you come from. So I think, we've got people that, middle school was really hard for them, right? We've got people that have some trauma in their background, like what I'm talking about with my background. Um, but I think, it's kind of a wide spectrum. That's probably what makes a good school, right? I mean, if we're all the same, we're probably not able to reach every kid and think about, things on a real, I guess, global level, right? So I think one of the things that I love about your podcast is, you're not bringing in all the same kinds of people. You're bringing in people that have really different takes and perspectives, and each guest you have on kind of pushes, my buttons a little bit, and makes me think, oh, that's an interesting way to look at the world. And I think that, and I hope that is what's happening at our school.
So I'm curious as to how that gets developed in your school. So again, the focus right now in my world, thinking about you, is this guy that builds and helps accelerate positive culture. And so that's what I'm trying to figure out is how is that culture built in your school in particular, knowing that you draw your people from the same geographical area. Um, but yet it's still a culture that you can build and foster and nurture, and it's not just, well, it's just the way it is, it's always been this way, we're going to continue to perpetuate the way it's always been. Can you walk me through that a little bit?
I think we've kind of grown together as sort of like a family. So, we're a group of educators that are really focused on celebrating each other, celebrating kids, celebrating our community, and kind of finding the awesomeness and positivity, in life's daily trials and tribulations. So, you mentioned kind of the collaboration. I think, we were collaborating before collaboration was cool. We were PLCing before PLCing was cool. I think, all of those things that kind of bring a family together, that's kind of what it's been like at our school. We've had ups and downs. We've had a group, I would say, of maybe 25 core people that have really just kind of grown up together. You know what I mean? Like gone from, okay, we're just starting education to, now we're much further along. There's a number of pieces that have led to our success, and really creating an award-winning culture in our own, environment. I think, really having like a strong SEL, social emotional learning, character ed, you know, curriculum and program, and really, figuring out ways to intentionally roll that out to students and staff. Um, that's been huge. Really building in all kinds of opportunities for voice and choice and student agency, and mobilizing students to really impact the school culture, not just looking at it as, this is an adult job, but this is the kid's job too. Um, I think, all of those things have really impacted. And then just bringing our parents into that fold, so it's become kind of a community effort to build this school culture.
It's fascinating to me. You say you've got this group of 25 or so that have just kind of grown into this together. Yeah, I've had the opportunity to work in quite a few schools, and I've been to a few schools where they had that same mindset. It was a group of people that grew into education together, and they'd been together for 15, 20, 25 years. And then I might come in as an outsider with different perspectives and different ideas, and I would be confronted with the idea of, this is the way it's always been here. This is our building. This is our culture. And sometimes there's that tension, that friction between trying to do things differently and embracing the way it's always been. So I'm curious, in your building, how do you grow together as opposed to stagnate together? What is it that causes everybody to continue to want to keep doing things differently? And then the second part of this is, we talk about this award-winning culture. How do you define that, and why do you think that your school is special?
Yeah, so we'll try to unpack one at a time. As far as how did this kind of evolve, or how do we get to that place? I think it really starts with having a mindset for learning. Our staff, we've had turnover in administration. We've had, other staff turnover. We've had district leader turnover. But there's kind of a core group that's like got this mindset that like, hey, I want to learn. I want to, kind of improve. I want to teach better today than tomorrow, kind of thing. And I think we've had that sort of as a focal point for my whole time that I've been around this group. So we started maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, winning awards for school culture, right? So it started off, it was kind of local stuff, and then it was state stuff, and then national, and then we even won a global award for school culture based on kindness and empathy and service and those kinds of things. We also basically implemented a number of programs and curricula and stuff that was getting different results here than schools around the country. And so what happened is some of those program directors and leaders, as well as some educators, started reaching out to us going, well, what's the secret sauce at Enterprise? Like, what are you guys doing that's so different? Like, why are your, test scores improving? Why is your discipline rates where they are? Why are your attendance numbers where they are? And so the interesting thing is the questions started getting thrown at me as the counselor and my wife, who was a leadership teacher at the time, to answer. And so we started getting people wanting to do site visits and come see, and I want to check it out and see what it's all about. And I keep hearing these great things about Enterprise, and it really forced Jen and I to kind of step back and try to figure out, well, what is different here? Because this is just what we know. And that's kind of, you've probably got that feeling from me. We're just a family, and this is just who we are, Dave. I don't know. And so I think through writing and starting to speak and that over the course of a few years, we started sort of teasing out, okay, these are the elements that have led to this success, right? And, we start talking about character, excellence, and community. And character is really, will you do the right thing? Excellence is, will you do your very best? And community is, what will you do for others today? These became like our house rules, right? So a lot of times schools focus on all these crazy rules and they're trying to keep track of all these things. What we figured out is it really comes down to these 3 things, not just from a student perspective, but from an adult perspective. And then we've sort of built that out to, okay, this even can apply to parents at home. This can apply to our community, business leaders, things like that. So I think through that process of trying to figure out, what was happening at Enterprise so we could explain it to people as they asked, we sort of developed this idea of, okay, let's embrace this award-winning culture and let's kind of label it that way, and let's see how we can help other people reach this. And so probably, I don't know if you want to go there yet, but one of the first things we did was we started a student-led podcast, and it was called Award-Winning Culture. And that really came about because we took a group of leadership students over to a statewide leadership conference called Service. It's a maybe 4-hour drive away. And it's this amazing event where they have like 5,000 or 5,000 students and educators, and they rent out this big arena, and it's kind of an all-day thing. Excuse me. And they bring in speakers and athletes and authors and all these just awesome people to like inspire the kids, right? And then the idea is that they'll go back and just infuse that everywhere. So we're sitting there, and it's probably 3/4 of the way through this incredible day, and we're listening to a 95-year-old Holocaust survivor named Nomi Bon. And she's speaking in broken English, and she's in a wheelchair up on stage in front of 5,000 kids, basically. And Dave, you could literally hear a pin drop. I mean, it's just dead silent. And I look around, and kids are kind of sitting forward, right? Mouths drop. They're just like hanging on every like word that's coming out of this lady's mouth. It's just so inspiring. I look around, there's educators in tears, as she's talking about these moving experiences dealing through the Holocaust and the grit that took. And my wife, who's sitting over kind of on the right side of me, I lean over to her and I'm like, we got to do this. And she gives me one of those weird, like, wife looks, like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, we've got to do this. And so at the next break, we started talking, and the idea became, okay, we've only brought like a handful of students to this awesome event, but we've got another 750 people back home. We've got teachers, we've got parents, we've got community, like nobody's experiencing this. So how do we take this experience and bring it home? And so that sort of led us to, well, maybe we can build a podcast where our students can learn from people like her and from people like him, and some of the cool things and messages that we were getting that day. And the more we talked about it, the more we realized if we build this right, it's not just going to impact these leadership students, right? It's going to impact all the listeners, all the people in our community, the parents, the business leaders, the educators within our building that are going to hear not only these messages, but our kids' reflections on it. So I'll stop for a second, but that's kind of like, I think, sort of the early seeds of like, where did award-winning culture come from?
I loved so much of that story. Yeah, it's powerful, and there are a lot of things I want to try to tease out of that. But the part that excites me the most is that, you had this thing that you knew was working where you were. And you said you were winning these awards, and your kids were growing, and they were thriving, discipline rates were improving. But you didn't just hold on to that. You said, we've got to grow this, and we've got to help other people do the same thing. It's truly that spirit of collaboration and collegiality, knowing that all kids are your kids, not just the ones in your building, not just in your district, but across your region, across the state, now across the country. And now you and Jen are doing so much work everywhere. Out of all that, though, the part that I want to pick apart real quick, and I'm curious about this. You said, and you're going to hate me for going here. You said you leaned over to Jen and she gave you that wife look. And I laughed because you didn't even have to expound. There are people listening everywhere that know what you're talking about. Now you and Jen, though, you've taken this idea, this concept, and you've got this brand now that is truly the two of you hand in hand, truly going nationally, internationally right now. What is it like working with a spouse in the nature in which you're working? I mean, it's intense right now. You guys are doing a lot of things with a lot of people in a lot of places. Can you just talk through that dynamic a little bit?
I love it, man. And I've gotten this question before, even from people at work. People will be like, I could never work with my spouse. I love it. And we've worked together for years. We're high school sweethearts. We met right at the end of high school, went away to college together. Part of why I got into education, I think I can sort of attribute to her and her family. She's a 4th generation educator. Her dad was an award-winning principal. I think being around him and her family and just all that kind of stuff got me excited about the idea of maybe I can take my talents and any, opportunities I have towards working with kids in a school environment. So I mean, do we have challenges? Sure. Do we drive together to work every day? No. I mean, we have different schedules. We have, sometimes different agendas. We come at things from a different perspective and a different lens. But I think that's probably fueled a lot of our success because um, we're pretty good about kind of working through that conflict. Well, you see it this way, I see it this way. Okay, let's come to some either compromise or rationale of, how do we move forward? And that plays out at school, right? Dealing with individual students and parents and stuff, but it also plays out in the business side of what we're doing with award-winning culture.
That's so good. And it's the reality that you have to have those different lenses, but yet you still come back and you say, but we're still united. We see this
Mm-hmm.
differently, but we still have the same goal, the same objective. At your school, I'm curious, was the objective ever to win awards?
Not at all. No, yeah, not at all. That wasn't, none of what's happened in the last, I'd say 5 years was on the radar at all. You start getting recognized, just kind of like out of the blue. And I think, one thing sort of leads to another. I know you were recognized as, an award-winning principal and, in many ways, I don't know that you seek that out. Like, it's nice to have that feedback. You know what I mean? It's nice for people to say, hey, you're doing some really good things at your school, you as an individual and you as a school and all of that. But I don't know that I do feel like you sort of have to balance with the other side of like the professional jealousy side, which is tricky. I've heard Jimmy Casas speak on this when he started winning awards and stuff, and I really relate to that a little bit because there is some, like, I don't know if I want to say finger pointing, but I remember being in a few district meetings where people were like, well, why don't you ask the award-winning school, right? And that was well before any sort of branding or, even some of the bigger awards. It was just like, you know what I mean? Like,
I completely know what you mean. Completely. So just for those people that don't necessarily know the story, I'll add just a couple of nuggets. So in 2014, so 6 years ago now, I was recognized as Michigan Principal of the Year. And I'll be honest, winning that award kind of changed me a little bit. I felt like, oh, I have this badge of honor now. And I did feel like now I was the guy that had to have all the answers for all the people all the time because I was the award winner. I actually had a boss, though, 2 years later, who we were in a meeting, and he he was kind of threatened by the fact that I had won this award. And he made the statement to me before, and he made the statement and it crushed me and it hurt me and it completely changed me. But he said to me, you didn't really deserve that. You just won that because people felt like they had to give you a bone. And I was like, ouch, that hurt. But I resonate with that because there are people that when you start to experience success, no matter how success is defined, whether it's getting a book deal or speaking or getting an award, will look at you and do all they can to try to knock that down. And then you have to balance with, do I care about their opinion? Yes, I do care about their opinion. Do I try to change their opinion? Do I stay true to who I am? I mean, and it's this awkward dance that you have to do moving forward. How are you handling all of that personally and professionally?
I think it's something that I'm still, figuring out, right? And still balancing. I think, even within our district, I know there's people that are excited for us and some of the things that we've got that, we're working on that are kind of coming down the pike. Um, but I also think there's the other side of like, okay, why them? Right. And I think that's hard sometimes. And so I do think it's something that I'm personally kind of working through still right now. I think it's it's not an easy thing, and the reality is we're not award winning every day. I mean, that's the truth, Dave. Like, our brand is award winning culture. That's what we believe in, but that's more of a mindset than anything. That's let's look at school culture through this lens or framework of character excellence and community. Doesn't mean that we're perfect, just like you're not perfect, right? And I that's kind of what that guy was probably telling you that day about, your award is, dude, don't get too big. You're still, you got to still work on stuff too. And I think, I don't know, that's that humility piece that we all have to kind of struggle with, I think, on a daily basis.
You nailed it right there. Where I misstepped and where I went the complete wrong direction was I took that award as though it was mine.
Mhm.
What I love about your story is that you have not once said that you won an award.
Mhm.
It has been the culture, it's been the school, it's been that community that won awards. You know, in schools across the country right now, PBIS is this big phenomenon where we talk about rewarding positive behaviors and trying to incentivize and encourage people to do the right thing. And I'm a firm believer in all that, and I'm a believer in the science behind it. But I've also got a guy that I admire quite a bit, and a personal and professional friend of mine named Brian Mindler, who
Mhm.
says, you know, that's great, but if you want to reward one, reward them all, because otherwise that jealousy kicks in and it undermines. You celebrate one kid and everybody else is looking at that kid saying, but why them? Why not me? So if one person does something amazing, celebrate everybody. And that's what I should have done. And that's what I didn't do, is I took it and
Mhm.
said, yep, I'm the award-winning principal. It's me. And I went and started to try to make a name for myself. What I appreciate about you, and even the branding that you're doing, it is award-winning culture. It is about the culture, which is an assortment of all the people with all the perspectives, with all of the ideas. And that's what you try to celebrate and what you try to embrace. And I appreciate that so much, because you got what I didn't. And that's huge.
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I think it's something that you kind of have to keep working at, right? I mean, even I was thinking when you were talking about PBIS, we're a PBIS school. We have, PBIS elements within our school. And I know that there are people out there that look at that and go, you got to be careful with that. Right. Um, and some of the crazy stuff that we've done for kids and for staff, that question has come up. Like, is there jealousy? Do people wonder why that kid, why that, staff member or parent or whatever? And I think what we've tried to do is kind of give everybody those moments of awesomeness throughout a school year, so that it isn't like, why is it Dave's turn now? When is it going to be my turn? Because they know that their turn was last week or their turn is next week, So I don't know. My brain just kind of went there because you were talking about PBIS, and I think that's been maybe an underlying secret to what's going on. Trying to find ways to make kindness normal. You know what I mean? Not like this isolated thing. Like, today we're going to celebrate Dave, and then we're just going to get back to work. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think you kind of alluded to this early on when I even asked the question of, how do you define an award winning culture? How do you define an award winning school? And you said, at first you didn't really know. You had a lot of stuff going on, and it was hard to break it down and to synthesize what is the element. I think where we often miss things in schools is we quickly jump on, this is the answer, and we hold on to one thing. We are a PBIS school, or we implement MTSS or RTI, and we say this is the answer, as opposed to realizing that all things work, but not everything works equally. What we have to do is identify what it is that we are after, and then start searching for the tools to support your common goal. And you guys have narrowed that down and found that focus now. And what you do is you build things around your focus. You don't build things around your tools and your processes. So again, you guys are doing some amazing things. And I love the fact that you're now sharing that with all of us so that we can learn and we can grow. And you're doing it via podcasts like this. You're doing it through speaking, but also with some books. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So we've got Jen and I kind of basically signed a 3-book deal with Edgy Gladiators. So my
Which
book is the
is
first book.
amazing, by the
They're
way.
awesome. Yeah, they're awesome people. Marlena rocks. We'll give Marlena a little shout out here. Um, yeah. So the first book will come out May 22nd. It's called Award Winning Culture. It really is like a school-wide lens of all the ways that we've kind of it's sort of our roadmap, right? To how do you build a culture and climate that's really special? And so we break down all of those kind of elements within character and excellence and community, so that people kind of leave there with a practical strategy of like, okay, how do we do this in our own school? There's stories, there's examples, all that kind of stuff. So that I'm super excited about. Jen is writing the second book, which basically takes that framework and that lens and applies it directly into the classroom. So that's going to be really fun for teachers to be able to go, okay, this is all good stuff. I got this big picture idea of award-winning culture and how we can build something special here. Show me how to do it within the room, right? Within the specific classroom. And so that will be coming out at the end of this year. I'm super excited about her project with that. And then we're teaming on a third book, which basically takes a wide angle, kind of we step back. How do we apply all this stuff to the world outside of school, right? To families, to businesses, everything else. Because what we've seen is that, some of the key elements that really make a special culture apply to a family, apply to your local grocery store, apply to wherever you are in life. And we've both kind of alluded to it throughout this, but it really is about celebrating people and relationships. It really isn't about the stuff.
So first of all, let me compliment you on a 3-book deal. Nobody gets 3-book deals unless their names are James Patterson, Tom Clancy, Stephen King. I mean, that's legit. And so people that don't understand this, let me try to break this down, because right now we're in this age where everybody is writing and everybody's trying to publish something. So let me explain what a 3-book deal really means. First of all, as an author, when you pitch a book to a publisher, the publisher has to vet you and figure out, am I going to be able to recoup my costs? Because it costs a substantial amount of money to hire an editor, to hire a graphic designer, to actually put a book in print. And they're taking a bet on one book, hoping that they will at least be able to recoup their costs, let alone make a profit. When they sign somebody for a 3-book deal, they're saying, yep, this person's legit. I'm pretty sure that this is gonna benefit so many people that I'll be able to recoup my costs, and I will be able to just magnify this person's voice because they have so much that they need to say. I have not signed any multi-book deals. Every book I've written has had to go to a different publisher. So I am like you're killing it. You're killing it, and that's super impressive. And so the fact that you have publishers that are out there saying, yeah, this guy, this family, this couple has an idea that is that substantial that we know people will pick it up is huge. And that's awesome. And you need to pat yourselves on the back for that, man. That's legit. That's awesome.
I appreciate you saying that.
It's seriously is. It's super cool. The fact that you also had in your head right now, that there are these 3-book ideas that need to be written is huge. When did you stumble across those ideas? When did you come out and say, oh yeah, we've got these ideas. We know what needs to be out there?
So, yeah, I mean, I've basically been working on the first book for a couple years. I blogged for a couple of years, and that kind of morphed into actually writing, the book. And I think going through that process and talking it through with Jen a lot and editing and getting, feedback on that, we sort of saw that, okay, this is a great, school-wide look at things, but, there's more to this than just the wide angle school look. Dave, one of the things that I noticed about all the school culture books that I loved, they were all written by principals. They were all written by superintendents. They were all the building leader specific, like, here's what you do as the building leader. And if you do these things, then you can get a really exceptional school culture. You can build this great place. And I'm not a building leader in that way. I am a building leader, but I'm not like the building principal or a superintendent. And what I realized is I have just as much influence, and a classroom teacher has just as much influence, and a parent has just as much influence, and the school leadership kid down the hall has just as much influence. And so I think my book in some ways was written for me, as a reminder for me. And, I realized that there's a lot of people out there like me that, maybe they don't have the building leader that they want, or maybe they're not in that position, but they want that school culture or that classroom culture or that office culture or whatever it is. And so that really fueled, I think, my passion in the early days. And carrying that forward, I think Jen had that same passion, like, okay, yeah, that's nice, but I'm not the counselor. How do I affect the entire school just within my classroom? And so that's where those ideas kind of started getting teased out.
That's powerful, because I think there are a lot of people that might be listening to this thinking, okay, that's all good, but my principal doesn't support this. My superintendent doesn't have that direction. I love the fact that you circle back and say, yeah, but you do, you have the power. And for those people that are doubting whether or not they have the power, if you're a classroom teacher, think about all of your classes throughout the day. Do you have that one kid in 1 hour that ruins it for the entire class? Because one person does make a difference. One person has tremendous power over the climate and the culture. And it's not always a negative, it can be positive as well. You don't need the title, you don't need the placard. You just need a voice. And you are amplifying your voice to help so many others. It's powerful, man.
I appreciate you saying that. And I think, yeah, hopefully we're amplifying others' voices, right? That's what you're doing with your podcast. That's what we started trying to do with our student podcast. And I hope, through writing, I hope that's what people come away with the book. I hope, that there's some pretty heartfelt, powerful stories, right? From my life, from our school experience, things like that. And I hope people leave like rejuvenated and energized to like, okay, I'm going to go just tear down walls to create an exceptional school culture.
It's pretty cool, man. And you do talk about amplifying it. And so you're connected with Marlena, who is amazing. And for full transparency, Bold Humility was through EduGladiator. So I got to throw that out there just so it's clear. But she's in Colorado and in Nashville and Annapolis. So she's not representing Washington. But you're also connected with the Teach Better team with over in Northwest Ohio. How did that connection happen?
Yeah. God, they're great. I love Chad and Jeff and Ray. They're just amazing people, which, I know you're good friends with them too. So I was on their podcast about a year ago. I had a blast, just talking about different things. Jen got to be on their podcast, I think, this last fall. And then we went to the inaugural Teach Better conference and got to speak at that. And I think there was a pretty good buzz about some of the things that we shared when we spoke at that conference. And I think that sort of caught their attention maybe. So they reached out for us to be a part of their speakers network, which was like really cool, like sort of humbling. Some of the people that are part of that, I think you've had a few of them on the podcast. They're just awesome people, like just crushing it. And so excited to kind of be a part of that. And the more we started talking to Jeff and Ray and Chad, the more we realized, hey, some of the things that we're doing with school culture and SEL and whole child work, that fits and dovetails perfectly with what you guys have going on with Teach Better, and some of the instructional side of it. And so, eventually got to a position where they kind of brought us on to be a part of Teach Better in kind of a bigger way, beyond just speaking. So I'm just super excited. I think we're all kind of learning what that relationship will look like and developing that over time. But right now I'm excited to be the director of culture for Teach Better. And that's kind of, one of the many hats that I'm wearing, back to that original question of, who are you? What do you do? That's one of those hats that I've put on. And so, figuring out ways to help, infuse SEL through project-based learning, through, classroom instruction, through, school culture, big picture kind of stuff. I think that's where we're trying to support the Teach Better community.
So as the director of culture, does this mean it's your responsibility to keep Jeff Gargis in check?
That's a big job. I do feel like Ray helps with that though, right? Like she's pretty good about keeping him in check. So that's kind of a team effort.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Now, I appreciate how you guys don't just you don't just stay in one lane either, man. You're saying what can we do to amplify this message? Because it's all about kids, man. It's about, again, going back to, it's not just your building, it's not just your middle school. It's every kid everywhere deserves this type of environment, deserves this type of culture, which is absolutely amazing and powerful. What's next for you?
So a couple different things. Jen and I are going to launch our own podcast. And so I think that will come out in May or June. I'm not sure exactly when yet. But we do these
because you've got all the time in the world.
Exactly. Yeah. So we do these kind of family walks where we take our dog and go, walk 5 miles or whatever. And it's a strange deal because we're both educators. The conversation invariably starts talking about just weird, nerdy things like, educational theory and pedagogy and school culture and climate and all this kind of stuff. And a while back, we kind of got the idea that, if we just took like this, what we do on these walks and just boiled it down to like 15 minutes, it might be kind of interesting to hear like a husband and wife sort of banter about like the educational world, right? And coming at it from different perspectives and stuff. So we're hoping to launch that sometime in May. Um, she's also working on a whole children's book line that's going to be incredible. It's all social emotional focused. And so, right now we're working with an illustrator on that. And so that's exciting. Hopefully that'll come out, in the next year or so. Yeah, I mean, just continuing to sort of grow our influence. It's weird, when you get hooked into social media and Twitter, like, it's suddenly a bigger, it's a bigger pool than you ever realized, where at first you're just like, how do I influence this building or this class or this, small little niche? And what you realize is, like you just said, there's all these kids out in the world that need specialness, right? That need to feel awesome, that need to feel welcome, that need to feel connected to their school. And we both know, despite all of educators and parents and everybody's best interest, it doesn't always happen every day. And so, if we can somehow deliver that and help inspire that and help support that, man, that lights us up.
That's sweet, man. That's awesome. It's like you guys are the Tom Brady and Giselle of education right now. You guys are just the king and queen out there ruling things. I hope you're okay with her surpassing you in notoriety and just killing it. And you following her footsteps. It's worked for Tom Brady. It'll work for you too, man. So just go with it. Whatever she wants to do, just nod. Wherever she wants to live, just go do your thing.
I love all parts of that comparison. That's a great comparison. That's awesome.
You're going to be a Hall of Fame award-winning culture guy. That's awesome, man. So we've covered a lot today, man. We've covered personal, professional histories and trajectories and projects, and I mean, we've covered a lot. But one thing that I always try to wrap up with, and I tell all the guests that come on this, that I want to always leave people with what I call the mic drop moment. There might be some people that are driving to the grocery store or driving to work, and they're listening to this podcast, and they know that we end these with this mic drop moment. So a lot of times they hold on just to hear this, or it's that thing that's going to resonate in their minds as they go on that walk with their family or as they're laying in bed tonight. So if you were to boil it all down and say, man, this is the thing I want people to remember, what is your mic drop moment?
So I'll tell you a story, Dave. This is probably a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago now. We had a local news station reach out to us that wanted to come do a story on our school. And they connected with me and they wanted to send a reporter out. And they basically were going to, it was like an anti-bullying thing, like for October. And they had heard some things we were doing and we're like, hey, we want to send somebody out to do a quick story. We'll be there and, maybe 45 minutes in and out. And then she's got another story across town. We'll get her on to the next thing. And I was like, this sounds awesome. Let's do this. So she comes in and she arrived probably 30 minutes before school started and was immediately struck by what we call our Wildcat Nation morning greeting. So every day we start school with high fives and fist bumps and smiles, and we play music, and this happens literally every day. We're just greeting everybody that comes into the school. And it doesn't matter if it's snowing or if it's rainy, or, we're out there with, hand warmers and hot chocolate, like anything we can do to stay warm, just to brighten people's day as they enter the school. So that happens every day. And we've done that for years. So she was just totally enamored with this. Like, she was totally struck by it. And so she started wanting to talk to different people. And the more people she talked to, the more people she wanted to talk to. And what started off as a 45-minute interview ended up lasting over 3 hours, Dave. We couldn't get her to leave. She talked to dozens of students and staff. She went to a leadership class. She was just having a blast. And we're sitting there, and it's near the end of her time. And it's myself, it's the principal, and it's this news reporter. And we're sitting in my principal's office, and we're just kind of debriefing. And if I'm being real with you right now, like, we're trying to wrap this thing up because, she had a meeting she needed to get to. I had some things I needed to get to. And we're kind of trying to usher this lady out, like, let's go, you've been here a while. Well, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she bursts into tears, like full on ugly cry. And my principal kind of reaches for a box of tissues, and I'm like, and she's like, why isn't every school doing these things? Why isn't every school greeting this way? Why doesn't every school have this character program? Why isn't every school like this? And so I started mumbling, well, that's why you're here. You can help tell us, tell our story to other people, share our message. And I'm sure I said a few other things. I'm sure the principal said a few things, but we were just kind of dumbfounded. We didn't expect tears at all. And she gets kind of quiet. She's got her head down, and she kind of slowly lifts her head up, and she's wiping tears away. And she makes direct eye contact with me. And she says, why wasn't it this way when I was in school? And Dave, even just telling you right now, just takes me right back to that moment, because for the next 15 minutes, she regaled us with stories of mean girls and disinterested educators and just the trials and tribulations of surviving middle school. And as she spoke, I started to realize these weren't tears of sadness. They were just tears of joy. Prior to that morning, she didn't even know it was possible for a middle school to have a welcoming atmosphere focused on kindness and empathy. She was just kind of blown away by that. And so we slowly kind of like, put her back together, and she went on her way. The interesting part, Dave, about the story is she moved on from Tri-Cities. She's now working in a big news market down in Southern California, but she stayed connected to us. So she still reaches out. She still wants to know, how's Wildcat Nation? You still doing the character work? You doing this, that? Because it matters, right? And so I think that lesson has just kind of stuck with me, the last few years, of like, how can we bring about tears of joy for everybody all the time, right? And that's probably unrealistic, but I think, her day and kind of some of the stuff that she shared with me really like inspires me to keep pushing for that. And so I think about, the kid that's sitting in our class that just wants to survive, the parent that drops their kid off hoping they have a good day at school. I think about this lady 15 years removed from a school environment, and immediately just like emotionally taken back to what it felt like to be a middle schooler. So that's what I hold on to. That's what I keep, so at the beginning, we kind of talked about joy. That's what I'm shooting for, man. Like every day, like tears of joy.
That is, that's awesome. That is awesome. You got me feeling it right now, man. That's powerful. That's what it is all about right there. When we all got into this profession to be those life changers, and it's not always about academic proficiency and standardized test scores. I mean, yeah, those things are important, but what you just nailed right there is what it's all about. That's how you change destinies. That's how you change lives. It's through joy. It's through giving people purpose, making sure that people feel valued and feel a part of something bigger than themselves. Mm-hmm. Dude, you're amazing, man. I appreciate you so much. Appreciate you, first of all, just being on this podcast and taking time out of your schedule and doing this, especially knowing how busy you are. I appreciate you bringing your voice to so many other people that needed to hear this. But more than I just appreciate you, man. You're doing it all, but you're doing it all for the right reasons in the right way for everybody, man. You're doing some amazing work. So thank you for you, and thank you for being brave enough to take you out there for so many others.
Thanks for having me on, man. And thanks for amplifying so many amazing messages, because there's tons of people doing amazing stuff all the time, and we don't always stop and take time to notice that. And so I think this platform that you have, I mean, it's an opportunity, not just for you, but for everybody, and you're doing it. Yeah. So thank you.
No, I appreciate that, man. That's all it is. It's me learning from others and feeling inspired by the amazing people out there. So we'll do it together, man.
Sounds great.